Hey guys, this is Jay Calderon with Jay Unboxing here, going over the massive card at the American Airlines Center in Dallas, Texas. Headlined by junior bantamweight world champion Juan Estrada and world titleist Roman Gonzalez in a rematch of their fight from 8 years ago. It was a very stacked card that featured quality fights and the three sort of main event fights that you were expected to really enjoy. In the first of those three world title fights, we had some great action until we didn't. World champion Hiroto Kyoguchi successfully defended his junior flyweight crown via a 5-round technical knockout. And technical must be emphasized. Facing the very small AXEL ARAGON VEGA, Kyoguchi had some moments of adversity. While perhaps it was just the low bar set, but VEGA seemed to really start well and it made for a fight. And while it could have been going on and progressing in more of that direction, after a while of even terms action, you had a bit of a weird incident. In the 5th round, after throwing a right hand that landed on the top of Kyoguchi's head, VEGA seemed to injure his hand and turned away from his opponent, forcing the referee to quickly stop the action. Bit unfortunate for all those involved. VEGA was doing well, and of course you'd like to see him get a shot at perhaps the biggest fight of his entire career. And of course Kyoguchi, you want him to be able to overcome that adversity and have a shot to really show the American fan base what he's capable of as this sort of special fighter that so many people tout. And of course, from a fan's perspective, you are sort of shortchanged a fight that looked like it was really going to be something pretty compelling. Nonetheless, Kyoguchi wins and moves on to the bigger fights in the United States, and there are some decent possibilities for him as well. Fights with fellow champions Felix Alvarado as well as Elwin Soto of Mexico would all be decent fights and relatively doable, seeing as how especially the Soto fight would make financial sense for DAZN that worked closely with his camp, and it would be a unification bout as well, so there's certainly some money to be made there for lower fights that oftentimes get overlooked. Really, all the fights at junior flyweight are pretty interesting. The guys can box, they are lightning fast, and these guys also have something that a lot of smaller fighters don't historically have, which is they have some knockout power to go along with it, so it should make for some compelling fights. After a swing bout, we had a co-featured bout of the evening between women's world champion Jessica McCASKILL taking on Cecilia Braekhus in women's welterweight action. Recently, Braekhus suffered her first defeat as a professional, and that was at the hands of McCASKILL, losing her titles in the process, and the 39-year-old was looking to avenge that loss here tonight. However, McCASKILL started well, hurting Cecilia in the opening round, doing the same really in the second round, and it really didn't start going Braekhus' way until about maybe the last third of the fight, the 7th, 8th round, and it was by that point, it felt a little bit too late. Jessica, to her credit, just continued to pressure the whole night and made Braekhus struggle between trying to box and brawl. And when she was in that kind of no woman's land, so to speak, she just couldn't make up her mind enough to stick with the game plan and try to really pinpoint exactly what she needed to do. And the issue for her was what she tended to decide to do was brawl, and every time she did that, she'd get stood up straight with the right hand over the top by McCASKILL, who just seems to have her number at this point. In the end, scores were 189, 99-90, and 98-91, all in favor of the champion, Jessica McCASKILL. Probably a bit wide, but, you know, a little unfair even to that extent, because Braekhus did show up. She did win some rounds, but still the right fighter won at the very least, which we'll get a little bit to that in the end of this video here as well, but at least the right fighter won. Both fighters sit in completely different positions now as well, which is interesting. For McCASKILL, you have so many options. Katie Taylor could move up, Clarissa Shields could move down. There are many different ways those fights might happen, and they all are solid cash fights for all women involved. However, for Braekhus, you are left a sort of fighter without a home. You can't move down safely at nearly 40. You probably just can't drop the weight comfortably. You can't beat the fighter in your division with all the gold in McCASKILL because you've tried twice and come up short. And you would risk serious injury at this point, moving up and facing the world champion there in Shields, who probably at this point is just too much of a fighter for you. Retirement seems probably the right choice, unfortunately, regardless of what she said after the fight, though it is her career and good luck to her. And in a fight of the new decade candidate, because this decade is new and this fight certainly will live up to it, Juan Estrada won a close, somewhat questionable decision over Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, partially unifying the 115-pound division and retaining his world championship. The issue with this is not so much the fight, because you'll listen to anyone tell you, and anyone with half a brain will tell you, that this fight was amazing. It was a phenomenal fight. Over 2,500 punches were thrown by each man. I think both threw in the vicinity and landed 300 of those shots, so they were pretty accurate as well. It was a really, really high-level competitive fight that saw brutality, but with a masterful touch to it. The issue is more in the scoring. The scores were 117, 111, and 115, 113 for Juan Francisco Estrada, with one judge having it 115, 113 for the Nicaraguan. The issue is that 117, 111 card. The reason that becomes a problem is because no matter what you say, even if you think the right guy won, which again, I thought Chocolatito won 116, 112, but even if you thought Estrada won, which I could at least entertain that idea, the fact of the matter is, him having a card for him that's 117, 111 means that no matter what happened in that ring, Chocolatito is not going to get a fair shake, and that makes it a robbery. Whether or not the right guy won or not, if the guy who loses the fight had no chance of winning, he's still being robbed. And people, I don't think, sometimes acknowledge that enough. And you hear all this talk, well, they can set up a trilogy. Well, it's different for Gonzalez here than it is for Estrada. Estrada's 30. He probably has a couple more years of his prime left. Gonzalez, on the other hand, might be at the tail end of his. Can we for sure say that Gonzalez has another performance like that left in him at 33 going on 34 years of age after going through yet another war with a very tough, high-quality opponent? We can't say that for sure. In many respects, it's like the Canelo Alvarez versus Gennady Golovkin situation, where you have two fighters who are, near enough to their primes that you want to see them fight, but by the time you get to a somewhat conclusive result and you want to see that final fight to really sort of, put a stamp on this trilogy or this series of fights, or whatever you want to call it, at the end of the day, you have a fighter in Golovkin who is probably too close to the end of that run of his that it just doesn't have the same appeal to it to some degree. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Gonzalez does have one more fight left in him. But I even picked him prior to this fight, kind of thinking this might be his last hurrah. Because again, especially at lower weights, 33 years old is a hell of a lot older than it is at those higher weights. And that's just one of those things where you're kind of caught in this tough spot if you're Chocolatito, because you probably want to avenge it. Whether or not you feel like you won both fights against Estrada, you probably want to cement it, but it's difficult for you. The kind of smart thing that both fighters could do, I think, is have Estrada fight Soren Visai for his mandatory challenger to maintain the kind of importance of the fight, because he'll lose a title, obviously, if he doesn't fight his mandatory. It's probably a fight I would pick Estrada to win, because I still think he just has Soren Visai's number, and that allows for the older fighter in Gonzalez to potentially either take a softer touch or at the very least sit out and rest and make it, to me, what would be a more fair fight. Because at the end of the day, I think he's a guy who won the fight, got hosed, and is now having to potentially fight in a trilogy at the age of 33 going on 34 against a very, very, very good fighter in Estrada. In any event, let's not let that spoil the night. It was still a tremendous fight, as I mentioned. Incredible action. It was everything we thought it was building up to this fight. We thought it was going to be this tremendous fight. It was better than we thought. So let's not let it spoil it completely. It's a fight that Marvin Hagler certainly would have been proud of, and with his passing, it's befitting of him that he got a fight worthy of his Hall of Fame career. So, of course, as everyone knows on Twitter, it was a tremendous fight. They were talking about it there. It was a lot of fun there. And of course, you can join me on Twitter, talking to me there at jcalderon_JOB. You can also email me at jonboxing@gmail.com. Visit jonboxing.com for schedule, results, betting odds, all sorts of fun little facts and information. Of course, be sure to look out for that. And as always, until next time.